It's Thursday, the 4th of July, 2024. It's general election day in the United Kingdom. Now, this is the fifth general election that I've been eligible to vote for in my adult life. It's now 20 years since my first opportunity to vote. And I have to say, I've never been so politically engaged, so politically active, so politically concerned about the state of our nation and the state of the world that we're in. But at the same time, I've never been as politically disillusioned with the status quo and the system that we find ourselves in. Yesterday, I listened to a political podcast which interviewed a young person who was excited about her first ever vote. And I found it very hard to empathize with that excitement, yet admired her youthful optimism and desire to participate in this election. I've been long skeptical of the political system. I would even go as far as saying anti-establishment. I've been politically homeless all my life. In fact, in those 5 years of election, I think I voted for the Reds, the Blues, the Yellows, and the Greens, and it's never worked out favorably. And it's never been more clear to me than today that the political system itself is built to serve its own interests rather than the interests of the people. What's more, the system itself is built with a form of self-defense mechanism akin to an immune system that protects the establishment interests and thwarts any threat to it. You could argue on that basis that the system is working perfectly well. It's defending its own interests, which is why I'm such a strong advocate for political change. And over the long term, that is ultimately where I'm placing my focus and thinking about how do we create a truly accountable, representative, participatory democracy that serves the interests of the various groups of people and individuals that represent our nation state. But how are we going to achieve that in the short term? Is there something that we can do now to break down the Uni Party? The Uni Party is a reference to the fact that we have these two major parties. The way the political system, in fact, is set up with its first past the post system means that it's always biased to a two-horse race between Labour and the Conservatives. Of course, Labour are challenging the Conservatives for the leadership this time around with 14 years in power at the Conservatives. And it's no surprise to witness, despite in the face of repeat failings of the Conservative Party, that Labour are expected to gain a supermajority in this election. It's very easy, of course, for Conservative voters to cross the line into the red, over the red wall and into Labour, because the parties are two forms of the same team. It's the home kit and the away kit. At this point in history, we're dealing with two very pro-establishment parties that represent global interests that are beyond our borders. So how exactly can we break that down? Is there an opportunity during this election to thwart that pursuit into this establishment future that we are walking or sleepwalking into? It's very difficult. There's been a very coordinated campaign on the left to say, stop the Tories. There's tactical voting going on in many different areas, simply with the objective to removing the Conservative Party. And I can completely understand the sentiments. But in many ways, this drum banging for change, they are really looking for change politically in terms of a party, and that's what they're going to get. But they're not going to really get any dramatic change in terms of the way that the nature and the system functions. And in fact, what we know is that both of these parties are beholden to global agendas that are beyond the interests of our own borders. So how do we even tackle this? Well, is it too late? You know, there's everyone talking about Reform being the challenger party. Very clearly, Nigel Farage and his party are speaking against those established interests. There's many different independents taking a stand, and there's other parties in the mix as well that have emerged, whether it's George Galloway's Workers' Party and various others, Freedom Alliances, etc., all playing their role to try and disrupt the political system. But many of them ultimately are seeking still to play the same game. Ultimately, I personally believe even if you change the team within the game, you might get a certain style of play. You might get a slight difference in the way the system operates, but ultimately it's the same game. And what we really need over the long term is a democratic system that is designed to represent the interests of the people and to encourage people to participate in a way that would serve their interests. Now, of course, it's important to recognize that democracy itself is actually built on self-interest. What do I mean? Let me explain. Well, in order for a democratic system to function, at least in theory, in the interests of the people, then one would need to vote in the interests of your own self-interest. Because if you vote in accordance with what you believe the country needs or what other people need, then if everyone does that, then no one is actually voting for their own individual needs. So the very best way to vote for a party or candidate that represents you under these circumstances is to vote for the candidate or party that meets your needs, wants, and desires, or at least aligns with your values, beliefs, and preferences. Now, there's very few parties, I'm sure, or candidates that meet the full breadth of what your own aspirations are and political views and beliefs and ideologies. However, you sometimes have to make compromises politically, and is there a choice on the table for you this time around that enables you to vote with confidence in a party that supposedly represents your interests? Well, let's take a thought on that for a minute. How many times in your lifetime have you voted for a party that have made all these different promises, and even if they made their way into power, do you even recall a time where they even became close to delivering upon what they say? It's very easy to get caught up in the hope and hysteria and hype of any electoral cycle where the latest politician or the latest party come along and say, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. And then what actually happens when they get their seat or when they get in power? They either get bogged down in bureaucracy or they get caught up in the machine itself, the global machine, the invisible hand of the global machine, and all of a sudden, the thing you voted for never happens. And I feel, despite all the hope and optimism in the world right now around the possibility of a reformation of the political system in the United Kingdom, I, for one, am skeptical. And firstly, if we take a step back and actually look at what we're voting for here in the United Kingdom, we're voting for a government. We're voting to be governed. We are engaging into the system of governance, which is giving the authority, the mandate to individuals and parties to make decisions on our behalf about how we will live our lives. Now, how is that working out for you? How did that work out for you the last 4 years? Now, do we have any other choice? That's the question. We're facing a decision of either participating or watching from the sidelines. I don't think it's possible to watch from the sidelines right now, but you're faced with a very difficult situation, facing a landslide victory towards Labour, which I'm sure many of us would oppose. And I say many of us, even to those who are lifelong Labour voters. I think people who have been lifelong Labour voters are going to vote for Labour anyway because they're tired of the Conservatives. But I don't think many of them are actually voting for a Starmer Labour government. Keir Starmer represents, I can't even see the connection between a traditional Labour voter and Keir Starmer. I just don't understand how one who's a lifelong Labour supporter would even entertain the idea of putting this man in charge of your party. And it's my hope that if there is a landslide victory, that tomorrow some sort of internal revolution happens to try and disrupt the status quo and actually get the guy out of power and put someone else straight in charge with the leadership contest. In fact, wouldn't it be fantastic if we saw the same within the two major parties? Well, I say fantastic. It would be interesting. But back to my original point is we're engaging with a system that I do not believe serves the interests of the people. In fact, the mandate, who gave the government? If you ask the question, and I did this recently in an online forum, I asked the question, what is the function? What should be the role and function of a government? What role should they play in society? And it was really fascinating. A 2-hour debate unfolded and there was no consensus, but there was an overarching view that the mandate of the government has been far overstretched. It's way beyond overreach. We saw that during COVID-19. And who is going to hold any of these individuals or governments to account for their actual priorities and needs? The manifestos, the social contracts, however you want to describe it, this is all predicated on the idea that we're going to continue a business as usual tomorrow and that the government will pick up the reins. Whoever takes the power will have the authority to make decisions over your life and your livelihood without your democratic input. I'm sorry to say that that is the state of reality. And if we want things to change, well, we have to be the ones that bring about the change. The system isn't going to change itself. In fact, the system is going to continue to defend itself and perpetuate the status quo. And I'm sorry, but if Labour get into power tomorrow, then we are in for a long road ahead, because this is very dangerous for democracy, because any landslide or supermajority affects effectively renders the opposition almost incapable. And let's face it, Labour have provided a woefully inadequate, incompetent opposition to the Conservatives over this time. So you've got a weak opposition taking over leadership and providing an even weaker opposition in the form of the Conservatives if they end up running in second place. Now, there is a real threat that Reform could actually take the seats from the Conservatives. I don't think the Lib Dems have got a hope in even getting close to being a contender. And maybe you'll see tomorrow that the Conservatives have some sort of coalition or pact with Reform to offer a stronger opposition to Labour, because in the absence of that, a landslide victory gives a mandate to this government to effectively not only take on the soft dictatorship that the leading party always takes, because let's face it, they get to do what they want for 4 years with minimal oversight. But if we completely lose the sense of opposition and there is a weak opposition, well, that's carte blanche to the incumbent party. And that, for me, under these current conditions, with the connections and priorities of Mr. Keir Starmer, that is a very worrying prospect. So at this time of the day, it's 3:30 on election day as I record this. My best advice to you at this point, if you're still deciding who to vote, and believe me, I've never been in such a pickle. You know, I've never enjoyed the process of voting because I go into it every single time trusting and knowing that things will not change. The last time we saw a red leadership in the United Kingdom, we saw all kinds of heinous war crimes. And in the face of a global conflict right now, escalating conflicts in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, it worries me greatly having another red leader in the form of Keir Starmer without any strong opposition, without any strong vocal voices across the political spectrum who are standing against a military-industrial complex to any great order. It really is concerning. So the ultimate situation I find myself in is thinking the long road ahead, the long road to freedom, the long road, the long steps to systematic change that we need to bring about in this country. I'm ready to start embarking upon that change and starting to think about how we can create a truly accountable representative democracy in the United Kingdom. We can take inspiration from what other parts of the world, things like the Swiss model that have regular referenda and they have a more direct democracy. They have a very different way of governance. At this point in history, we really do need change. And all this mantra of a vote for Labour is a vote for change. It is simply a change in government. It's a change in party. It's not a change in ethos to any great degree. But this is what we are now facing the reality for. Now, I'm usually an optimist, but I'm bringing an eternal dose of realism today, because the hard reality is this. If you want to break the Uni Party, if you want to break the Uni Party, then you can look at the polls in your area, and there's some brilliant websites that kind of aggregate the different polls, and you can see which party offers the greatest possible opposition to the Uni Party. But that relies upon other people in your constituency all wanting to have the same possible outcome of removing the Uni Party, this duopoly that we are up against. And unfortunately, the polls themselves skew behavior, because when people look at the polls, they tend to vote in accordance with the polls. So to actually mount a genuine opposition to the Uni Party, the remaining voters would need to unify together to some degree to actually offer a genuine opposition and actually go ahead and get that tactical vote. And tactical voting may actually require you to vote for a party that you don't approve of. If you wanted to stop Labour getting a supermajority in many seats, you would have to vote for the Conservatives, and many Conservatives have thrown in the towel on their own party. There is no conservatism in the Conservative Party anymore, so they're looking outside to reform. So, you know, if you choose the Reform option and you're in an area where actually you're taking votes from the major party and not enough people do that, then you're actually weakening the position of the opposition. It's a very tricky situation. So ultimately, you're left with a choice, is to vote for a protest. A protest vote is the best bet that you have available if your situation is that it's still a two-horse race between Labour and Conservative. So if the Reform Party meet your particular values and needs, or the George Galloway's Workers' Party, or the Alternative Party in your area, or the Independent in your area, that's your choice. Or you have a third choice, which is spoil the ballot and leave a protest vote. Either way, it's a protest vote. And to me personally, I'm more and more tempted to vote None of the above. I do not consent, because ultimately, by consenting in this process, I'm consenting in the system, a system that I fundamentally disagree with. And I actually have no belief or faith that any of those standing right now offer the real opportunity for long-term systemic change. They may change the policy, they may change the way the sails are set in the wind, but ultimately, the tide of today is on a very clear path. And whatever party does get into power, whatever candidates get elected, we are in a very difficult global environment where there are very clear agendas and there are very clear mechanics at play beyond our borders that influence the way that our culture and our society is unfolding. So that is pretty bleak. I'm sorry I don't have a more optimistic message. The optimistic message is that the work begins tomorrow, that we begin to rethink and reimagine how our democracy can unfold into the future. So good luck today. Let us know how you get on with your vote. As far as I see it, you only have a protest vote on the table, which is to vote against the Uni Party no matter what. So choosing any candidate or party on the ballot sheet that is not Labour or Conservatives, or you take the road of spoiling the ballot and saying, I do not consent, none of the above, and you join the road ahead to get together to start to unify in our thinking about how we can actually change the political system and build the system of tomorrow, so that the next time a vote comes around, we're no longer voting for a party or a candidate. We're in fact voting for a brand new system that actually better suits the interests of the people and removes the power from the establishment. That would be my prerogative. Let me know your choice. Good luck today. How are you feeling about this whole thing? I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling completely disillusioned and as homeless as ever before. Now, if, like me, you are feeling completely alienated and disillusioned by what's going on, and you simply want to opt out of this technocratic state, then I have good news for you. Coming up this September, the People's Reset is coming to the United Kingdom. What was originally began as the Greater Reset in 2020 and 2021 in the United States and Mexico, as a rebuttal, as a counter to the Great Reset put forth by the World Economic Forum, the Conscious Resistance Network, Derek Bros and co., John Bush, they launched an event called the Greater Reset. It's run for 5 years running now, exploring solutions to the issues of our time, looking at how you can opt out of this current system, how we can build parallel structures and societies. If that sounds appealing to you, how we can take our power back and we can explore new solutions from the grassroots up, then come and join us in Bath this September, the 27th to the 29th at the Apex Hotel for the People's Reset UK. Head over to the greaterreset.org to find out about the event, get your ticket today, and come and join us and figure out how you can opt out of the technocratic state and be part of the change you want to see.